At first look, this gospel would be just considered the story of the man born blind who was healed by Jesus, and we might just describe it that way. But actually, there are 3 verses that describe at first who the man is, and then one verse describes who he is, and then the other 2 verses are the healing that takes place. So out of the 41 verses of this passage we just heard, 3 of them have to do with the man born blind and his healing. The rest is arguing about it. The rest of the whole part, they're arguing about whether Jesus is really a good person or a sinner, or whether the man who was born blind is a credible witness, or what kind of person he is. So there's a lot of arguing that takes place here, because this is really not about physical blindness. In fact, a woman who was a member of a parish where I was many years ago, she was completely blind, and she worked for Nike. And she said, those gospel accounts of the healing of those who are blind, they're never about physical blindness. It's always about spiritual blindness. And I paid a lot more attention because she gave me insight to those passages. Well, here's 3 spiritual blindnesses that I'd like to point out. The first one is a blindness of judgmentalism. The second one is a blindness of prejudicial attitude. And I don't mean like prejudice only in terms of religious prejudice or racial prejudice or all other kinds of prejudices that exist. Those are evil in and of themselves. But this is any prejudged notion that we have about somebody, and we let that drive us. So a blindness of judgmental attitude, blindness of prejudice. And the third one is blindness that fear causes. So first, the blindness of judgment. And it's the apostles. This starts out where they come upon this man who was born blind. And then the argument begins. They ask Jesus, "Rabbi, is it this man's own sins or the sins of his parents that caused for him to be born blind?" First of all, I should have added maybe a fourth kind of blindness, a social blindness, because the man could have said, I can't see, but I can hear what you're saying about me right now. So they missed that. But the attitude is that if somebody is suffering a malady, and this was common at Jesus' time, but it's also somewhat common in our own time, then it must be something they did that they deserve that, or something their parents did that they deserve that. And that's a judgmental attitude. When we see someone suffering, lots of times, or if they're unemployed, we'll say, well, what's wrong with them? Can't they get a job? And not realize the complexities that led to a situation of their unemployment. Or if they're homeless, what's wrong with that person? That's a very common attitude, to blame the victim. It happens a lot of different ways. And so they're doing this to this man. And what's Jesus' response? No. This is so that God's goodness may be manifest. Because God is going to bring something good out of the physical blindness the man has, and it's something that's going to give us new understanding of who Christ is. So that's the first one as we understand it in the Gospel of John, this blindness of prejudice on the parts of the apostles. Then there's the blindness of the judgmentalism. Then there's the blindness of prejudice, and that's where the Pharisees, they already have it in for Jesus. They disagree with his interpretation of the sacred scriptures, disagree with his understanding of the temple, disagree with how he takes the Sabbath laws. They also disagree with how he claims himself to be the Messiah, and they greatly disagree and think it's absolute blasphemy with his declaration to be the Son of God. So they have a lot of reasons not to like Jesus, not to agree with him. And so when he does something good to heal a man who from birth has been unable to see, now he can see, rather than say, that's a good thing. They're not able to see that. They see there's something behind that. He's got some bad motive, or he's trying to trick people, or maybe this man wasn't really blind. Maybe it's just a trick. So all these negative things that they're trying to see into it, that because of their prejudicial notion about Jesus, we don't like him, so whatever he does, even if it looks good, it's not good. It's not good. So that's the blindness of prejudice. And we'll get into how this applies to us in a moment. And then the third blindness that we see is the blindness of fear. It's on the part of his parents. Remember, they weren't getting the answers they'd like from this man, where he would say, well, I think he's a prophet. Yes, he did heal me. Yes, I was blind from birth. And they don't listen to him. So they bring his parents in, even though he's an adult and can testify for himself. They bring his parents in and ask them about all of this. And they'll say, yes, we are his parents. He was blind from birth. But how he was healed, we don't know. And the reason they said that, as St. John describes it, is because they had heard those who follow Jesus are getting kicked out of synagogues. And so they were afraid that this would rob them of their ability to worship. And so fear overwhelms them. Now, we also see that fear even after the resurrection on the parts of the apostles. Remember, they're hiding in the upper room. Jesus appears to them and says, and St. Thomas, remember, he didn't believe. They're afraid, they're hiding. But after Pentecost, then they have a conviction. They have the power and the strength and the gifts of the Holy Spirit. And now they have not only the conviction, but the capacity, the strength to go forward and proclaim the gospel. And they're fearless. They're fearless. But in this case, the parents are still filled with fear. So how does this work for us? We also see the blindness of judgmentalism, the blindness of prejudice, and the blindness of fear. Judgmentalism. You know, one of the sad things, even in the midst of this coronavirus, I figured it was going to eventually happen, and I've already seen it on a video where somebody is saying, well, maybe this is God's wrath. Please, don't insult us. Don't be so cruel. That someone already has said that, but that's happened other times. Remember, after 9/11, some people were saying similar things. Well, maybe this is God's judgment. Well, first of all, we should never do that to God. That we should first of all think that we know what God's thinking, but also put that on him to put him in such ill light. Because the God that Jesus reveals as God himself is a God of mercy and compassion and healing. A God of healing. So we have to get beyond that negative and ignore or be rightly and justly critical of those kind of notions that are judgmental or seeing something into this. Because it's also a great insult to those who are suffering from this. Good people who, through no fault of their own, have contracted the virus or are being called upon, like all of us, are making sacrifices for that virus. So it's not that. But what did Jesus say? It's so that goodness can come forth from this. And in the case of this man, it's a new manifestation of who Jesus is as the Son of God. It's going to become clear, especially as we move on from this story and on to the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus. So what is the good that comes out of this coronavirus? You know, there are a number of things that I have heard, not to belittle what the genuine suffering that is taking place all through our world. But there are also moments of grace. One of our parishioners mentioned these to me, that he said he was out power washing his driveway, and he noticed just in the neighborhood, families walking together, a dad throwing a baseball with his son, a neighbor that he's seen and waved, but they've never spoken to each other, but they're talking to each other, far enough, social distancing, more than 6 feet away, looking over the fence, but having conversations that never took place and spending time together. I've had a number of people tell me they're spending more time and having more dinners with their family. So there are some good things that are coming out of this. In fact, that man, our parishioner, also told us that he mentioned that when he was on a conference call with a CEO and some other people that he does business with. And as they were going around introducing themselves and maybe saying a little bit about themselves at the beginning of this conference call, our parishioner mentioned, I'm just going to mention this here. I happen to be Catholic, and if you don't know, and this was last Thursday, today at 1 o'clock, Pope Francis is going to be praying the rosary and inviting the whole world to be part of that prayer. And, I don't know if any of you are Catholic or believers, but if you are a believer, even if you're not Catholic, just join in some kind of prayer if you'd like to. It's up to you. But I just thought I would mention that for your awareness. And then it went around the room. What happened later in the day, after our parishioner had prayed the rosary with his family, later he got a text from that CEO and said, I thought you'd be interested in this picture. And it was him and his family sitting around the floor of their living room praying the rosary together. He was Catholic. But a lot of time in business, we don't even talk about those things about our faith. And yes, sometimes it's appropriate, sometimes it might be inappropriate, but still, it's a call to say something about our faith, to be a witness of our faith, and you never know where you're going to touch another heart. And those good things have been coming out of this. I know I'm becoming proficient at Zoom meetings, as I know a lot of other people are too. So there are things, I'm learning new skills, how to make those little videos that I'm putting up every day. So good things can come even out of a horrible thing. And so we're called to look for those blessings in the midst of this tragedy and difficulty that we're all facing. And hopefully a lot of good that will come is compassion that we show, an awareness of our global solidarity. The second prejudice, the first one being that of judgmentalism. The second prejudice, the blindness of prejudice. And the prejudice is again the attitude that the Pharisees have about Jesus. They're so judgmental, they can't see anything good in him. Well, that happens in our own time. If somebody, we all do this, and I've heard it so many times, but I've thought these things too. If somebody's from a different political party, or they have a different opinion than I do on this or that, or maybe they hurt me in some way, or maybe I just don't like this person. Sometimes it's just an attitude like that. Then even if they do something good, they've got some motive going on there. And we sometimes think that we're reading their minds. Well, they're only doing that to try to gain favor. We sometimes act like we know what somebody's thinking and what their motives are behind their actions, instead of seeing they did a good thing. They did a good thing, and we should honor that good thing and appreciate that good thing, and maybe even change our attitude about this person that we've been prejudicial about, whatever it might be, why we've prejudged them. So there's something there to remind us to open our hearts a little bit more and see the good, what the Pharisees were unable to see in Jesus. And then the third kind of blindness is the blindness of fear that the parents have in this story. But that blindness, gosh, I've seen that a lot around this coronavirus. There's fear about getting sick, fear about what this means for our world, fear about are we going to have enough paper products? That's been something flying off the shelves, but a lot of other things. Are we going to have the ventilators? Are we going to have the masks or the gloves that the medical staff need so desperately? So there's those kind of fears, but sometimes those can paralyze us and then keep us from working at good solutions. Because remember, in the Bible, a friend of mine pointed this out to me, there are 366 times where somebody says, do not be afraid. It might be Jesus, it might be an angel, it might be a prophet, God himself are saying 366 times in the Bible, one for every day of the year, and then one more. Be not afraid, or do not be afraid. And why do we need more than just the year? Because we're scaredy cats. We're frightened by many things. And Jesus or God, the prophets, the angels have to keep reminding us of that message. Do not be afraid, but trust in God's goodness. Trust in God's providence. Trust in how God made us. Remember, God designed us, our Creator designed us to be resilient, to be innovative. Look at all the amazing things that we have. Hospital systems can look ahead, and leadership who can look ahead and say, we need to flatten the curve. And even that's now part of our jargon, because we're able to learn from how this virus has harmed so many other people in other parts of the world and see that, and then they've passed on what they've learned from that so that we can benefit from that and help to alleviate some of that and be ready and be prepared. That's what, not fear, but what good planning. Yes, it's serious. I'm not saying it's not serious. It's very serious. But then we use the gifts that God has given us and figure this out. And all part of figuring out is putting our trust in God and in the gifts that God has given to us, not to be paralyzed by fear. So there are a couple things I'd like to leave with you. Is the time, since we are all furloughed or working from home or studying at home, we have the remote learning or digital learning for many different levels of schooling. What are the opportunities that are available to us now, and to try to see what those blessings are? Look for those opportunities, the time with family, a time to learn a new skill, to start playing guitar again, or spending time with your children, whatever it might be. Just look for the opportunities, the new skills you can develop, the time to read, and not to just try to find a way to fill the time, because there are a lot of ways we can fill the time that would be wasteful and non-productive, and then by the end of when we get back to work and our places of school, then where are we? Do we advance ourselves in any way? Think about, how can I advance myself? How can I help advance my family? How can I help advance our business or our community, this parish, the church, the mission of the gospel? Because some things can be advanced or learned about now that we had never been forced to think in this creative fashion, in this particular fashion. So we're going to discover new things. So think about what the good is that can come from this. But the second thing I'd like to leave with you is just to see the beauty of a community that's coming together, not just locally, but globally. One of the things I've been inspired by are those who have embraced this call at great personal sacrifice to do the social distancing. I mean, our churches we have to close to public mass. That's a good common sense decision for the sake of staying healthy. But it's going to hurt in a lot of respects. But we did that willingly because we want to cooperate for the good of everyone. There's this sense of global responsibility that is quite remarkable to behold. I'm very impressed with business owners who just went, well, I guess this is what we have to do, but it's causing great sacrifice for them and their employees. But the cooperation that's taking place, and then how can we help those business owners? Some are saying things like, buy gift cards so that they have some cash flow, or those who are takeout businesses, go help them out. There are ways to think ahead. How can we support each other? Those who are homeless, who aren't able to take care of, they already were in a difficult situation. Now they don't have the luxury that those of us have in our homes, of being able to protect our environment because they have no place to stay. I've seen a lot of people reaching out and saying, how can I help them? And we've had great response in our mercy teams and a lot of other organizations. So a lot of good is coming out of this. So that's something just to consider, is that notion of our cooperative spirit. How can we work together and see a goodness that's coming out of that as a collective humanity? I refer to it as a global solidarity, that the whole world is in this together. And we have a chance to show a unity and a global compassion that we just hadn't been called upon to do before. And we have nothing to be afraid of if we trust in God, trust in our ingenuity, and trust in each other. Yes, we're having to fast from the Eucharist, those who are not able to be at this Mass, which are Catholics all over. We have to fast from this, but may that fasting help us to hunger for the Eucharist even more. May it help us to hunger for the day that we can return. And in that hunger, reach out to God in new ways. I encourage you to use this time for prayer, for praying the rosary, to develop new pious practices, read the scripture more. Lots of times we say, well, I'd pray more, but I don't have time. Well, now many of us have more time than we had before. Let's use that wisely for good, for spirituality, and advance ourselves. And also embrace this notion of our solidarity, that we may be united through all of this, trusting in God and also trusting in each other, because God gave us to each other.